introduction, and thank you for that very nice welcome. Would like you to recognize my wife Carol over here. It's a real delight to be here today, and it sounds like there's a lot of enthusiasm. Are we going to have a good day tomorrow? That's really the question. That's good. And, you know, the Republican Party and the Republicans keep saying they're looking for a candidate that can beat Obama. And yeah, you know, I've counted them up, and I know this number is exactly right. 2,172 times in the media, they say, Ron Paul's a nice guy, but he can't win, so don't vote for him. I'm just making up the number, but you know you've heard that a few times. But you know what? When they dare do a poll and run my name up against Obama, guess what? We come out the best. Surprise any one of us, because the freedom message is a broad message, and you know, we do get support from independents. Believe it or not, we get support from some Democrats too. So it is broad-based, but it is true. There is a challenge to the Republican primary, but the whole problem that the country has is that we are so polarized that we have, in one way, they're fighting over power. At the same time, they believe in the same thing. Does the foreign policy ever change? Republican or Democrat? No. War after war and keep going. Preventive war and drone missiles and what about civil liberties? Does one party protect civil liberties more? Absolutely not. Both parties challenge civil liberties. Which party has stood for really challenging the Federal Reserve? Neither one. Which party cuts spending? Neither one. So if you can get a candidate who'll start talking to Post Group because freedom brings us together, maybe for different reasons, it's freedom that can win, and freedom should bring all of us together to solve our problems. That's right. You know, freedom is a relatively new issue, although bits and pieces were worked on for even centuries. It was really with our revolution, the real test was tried out. And it was very successful. We became the richest country, and we became, you know, the freest country. And we proved the point, which other countries have too. The freer a country is, the wealthier the country is. Yes, so if we're getting to be a poorer country because we're less free, wouldn't the answer be, why don't we demand our freedoms back? That's right. And we'll get our prosperity back as well. That's right. But I'm afraid we're letting it slip away. The freedom test that we've had in the last 100 years, I think, has been severely eroded. And we've lost our confidence. I think what happened was that because we were free and prosperous, people concentrated more on materialism than they did on the ideals and the conditions on which wealth is produced. And then it generated a class of citizens who thought, well, wealth is the goal, and there's a lot of wealth, it's endless, so we'll just go to the government to redistribute the wealth. At both ends of the spectrum, and the welfare state evolved. They said, well, the welfare is to help a few poor people to make sure nobody falls through the crack, not realizing they introduced the notion that the principle was that the government could redistribute wealth. Guess who jumped on it? It was the wealthy who jumped on the redistribution of wealth. They pretend to help the poor, they throw crumbs to the poor, and guess what? The wealthy gets the bailouts, they get all the benefits, they benefit from the inflation, they benefit from the destruction of the currency, they benefit from the contracts. At the same time, we set up programs like housing programs. But what happens when the crunch comes? The rich get bailed out, the middle class lose their jobs, and the people lose their houses. So it's not working, and it's rewarding the wrong people. This is the one thing about freedom. The rewards come to those who work hard and strive to take care of themselves, and they benefit. There's no doubt we're going in the wrong direction. I read a figure in the newspaper this morning that sort of tells us the story. And the story is that we're not having less laws being written. Somebody added them up. They added up all the new laws as of January this year, just in 1 month because it's a new year. And this didn't involve just the federal government, but federal and state and all the way down. There were 40,000 new laws put on the books, just in 1 month. I would say that we should work for the day where we can take 40,000 laws off the books. We have way too many laws. There's control of all citizens, cradle to grave. They can come into our houses. That Fourth Amendment means nothing. And we just can't keep doing this because it stifles us, it discourages us, it undermines the prosperity, it undermines the marketplace, and therefore we're in this mess today. You know, the founders did the best they could. They weren't overly confident because they said, you know, we've given you a republic, as Franklin said, if you can keep it. And also, John Adams said, you know, the Constitution is a law, but it's only as good as the people. If the people are not a moral people, the law won't take care of it. So we can complain about the president, the courts, and the Congress and all, but we have the responsibility. But this is where I'm getting excited and I'm getting more optimistic because the people are waking up and they're sick and tired of it, and Congress has to hear the message. The politicians in Washington are at least 10 to 20 years behind the times, and they have no idea what's happening at the grassroots right now. You take the money issue, for instance. You know, we talk about the power seeking of both parties, but if you talk about the money issue, everybody has an interest in it. Money, the currency, is 1/2 of every transaction we have, whether you get paid or buy something or sell something, is half of the transaction. That's important. But this is not a Republican issue or a conservative issue. It should be everybody's issue, and it is. Right now, because we've called attention to the importance of the monetary system, 80% of the American people agree at least what we ought to have is a full audit of the Fed and find out what they've been doing. And they're catching on. There's about 4 or 5 pieces of legislation that's been recently introduced dealing with the monetary issue, dealing with the Federal Reserve to try to rein in the Federal Reserve. Of course, the simple solution to it is to have a bill that just flat out repeals the Federal Reserve. That was all. Right. You know, this week I went back to Washington on Wednesday. I don't know if you noticed, but Bernanke was before the banking committee. Stop in and say hello to my friend Ben. How are you doing? But I asked him a few questions. I pointed out to him, you know, about the price of gasoline and silver. He makes fun of paper, of course, and he says anybody who's concerned about inflation are the kind of people who take their money and store it in their mattress. But of course, putting it in a CD doesn't help you very much either. You might have trouble getting out of the bank. At least you have the mattress and get your money back out of that. But you know, I pointed out to him, you know, that when he came into office, if you had an ounce of silver, you could get 4 gallons of gasoline. Today, you can, with an ounce of silver, you can buy 11 gallons of gasoline, which means that if you have an old silver dime, it's almost enough to buy an entire gallon of gasoline. And what does it cost now? $3.50, $4, and it's going up? He's destroying the value of the money, and people recognize it. Every so often in history, whether it was back in Roman times or whenever, when the government eventually destroys the money, the people lose trust, the government goes broke, and there has to be a monetary reform. And we're verging on this. It's getting close. Now, it's been insidious for 99 years. The Fed was started in 1913. 99 years, it's gotten rid of 98% of the value of the 1913 dollar. And yet the end stage of the currency comes rather rapidly. We haven't had that example except under the continental dollar. That's why the founder said, don't ever allow the politicians to print the money, use only gold and silver as legal tender, and you can't have a central bank. So they put all that in the Constitution. But currencies, when they slip and slide and the value is destroyed, eventually the end stages go rather rapidly. Just think of Mexico or Zimbabwe or Germany, these other places, because the value is eventually lost in a hurry. Right now, there's still a fair amount of trust, undeservedly, in the U.S. dollar, because we're the reserve currency of the dollar. We're still printing money and buying stuff from overseas. And they expect the dollar and you to bail out Europe. That's really the plan. Now, the European banks and the central banks of Europe are in big trouble, and they have not resolved it because the debt at this condition has to be defaultable. It has to be liquidated. You have to wipe it off the books so you can get stuck back to economic growth. But they won't allow that to happen because it would hurt the banks. Now, I think when we get in a mess like this, people who've been making a lot of money, if they're bankrupt, they ought to go bankrupt and not be allowed to dump the debt on the American people.
Right.
So the point is, the dollar won't last that long. There's a limit, and that point is unknown. You can predict trends, but you can't predict timing of these events. Many of us have talked about the housing bubble and the NASDAQ bubble, but true Austrian economics doesn't teach that, yes, you know there's a bubble, but you can't say on what day it's going to burst, or even what year, because that has a trust factor. There's a subjectivity to this, and the trust is still out there. But the inevitability is obvious. Common sense tells us this. You can't have a $1.5 trillion deficit every year and think you can continue to do this. If that were the case, we wouldn't have to work. We could just run up deficits and print the money and spend it and let somebody else take care of it. But people know it's not true. And that's why I think things have changed from 4 years ago. I know many of you were involved 4 years ago, a few less longer than that. But there's a definite difference in this country. One, economics. With the bursting of the financial bubble, the people of this country and around the world have come to realize this is serious and it's not going to go away. And they have these numbers and they're predicting and say, well, the stock market is doing fine. But the other thing that has happened is the American people have gotten sick and tired of these wars, and the wars ought to be ended, and we ought to bring our troops home. To Chairman Bernanke that he claims there's 2% inflation rate. I told him, I said, I did ask him if he did his own shopping. He said he did. But I told him, I said, you say it's 2%. I said, nobody believes that. If you're on a fixed income, or if you're on retirement or Social Security, I said, nobody believes that the prices are going up only at 2%. All you have to do is look at gasoline prices and these different things, and it's going up much faster. But what the people get trapped. The people who can do the trading, the in and out, and the shorting, and derivatives, and they get bailed out, they're in a different category. They don't care what the price of gasoline is. You do, and it makes a difference. But a lot of people think, well, I have to have stocks, I want to invest in stocks, and in a really free society, stocks would be very good. They'd pay you dividends and this sort of thing. But if you would have bought the Dow Jones average, in 1907, just 5 years ago, it was 13,000. Today they're excited. They're excited that the stock market is $13,000. 5 years, and it's still 13,000. But the whole thing is, if you took into consideration inflation, in order for you to have made any money, the Dow should be up just to break even. It has to be at 14,000. That's why people feel poor, and they look at their 401ks and their savings. It's just really, really tough. So you say, well, I don't want to trust that system because the economy is not doing well. So you want to save it like some people want to. They want to be frugal, and that's what we should be. But if you put your money away and you make 1% or less than 1%, that's not very good. I've called attention to Greenspan and Bernanke on this. I said, you're keeping interest rates artificially low for the benefit of the banks, and the people who try to take care of themselves or maybe save their money and go to college, you punish them. And they don't deny it. And they say, well, we have to look at the big picture. We have to take care of the economy. We have to stimulate the economy. And some people might suffer from that. So they don't really care. They think this is normal to make people not save money. So where do you go? You don't have your stocks. You don't have your, and you can't save in CDs. So it's a real mess that we're in. But you know, if just to show how bad it is, if you would have bought the Dow Jones with gold 5 years ago, you would have paid 19 ounces of gold. Today, it would only be worth 7 ounces because of real value. So it's even worse than the dollar value because gold is a better measurement of value than paper money. So it's a terrible situation. So if the people are in investment advising, you know, they have a job cut out for themselves because if you trade, it's risky. If you save in dollars, it's risky. And it's just what you need in this country to solve that problem, to give people incentive to work and to save, is you have to have sound money is what you have to have. What would we have to do that? It wouldn't be difficult. Just legalize the Constitution. It's still on the books what money should be. It should be gold and silver. Yeah! One of the other things that we have to do, Keynesian economics teaches that what makes the economy, what makes the world go round is spending. Spending is the engine. And that is not quite true. The real engine of economics is hard work, producing products, and work, and then save some money, and that becomes capital, and you reinvest. Today, there's essentially no savings. There hasn't been any savings. And the Keynesian answer is that, well, it's because people aren't spending enough money. It's the reason we're in a recession. Well, maybe they don't have a job. Maybe that's why they're not spending money. Well, maybe they have maxed out on their credit cards. Maybe they can't get any more credit. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe they're frightened because the economy is so rocked because of the monetary system. He says, oh, under those conditions, if the people get frightened and they won't spend the money, the government has to spend the money. Oh, okay, where's the government get money? I mean, they've never produced anything. They've never worked hard. They've never had a productive job in their life. What do? They could tax us more, but that would drive the economy down even more. They can't tax it. They could borrow more, but then the interest rates would go up. Oh, we can't do that. They have the answer. We'll just print the money. And that's going to solve the problem. And that's what they're doing to the tune of trillions of dollars. It's the only thing they have to offer. That's why it's coming to an end. And that's why we ought to be prepared. And this is why, you know, we have this opportunity. We have the attention of the people right now. Because if most people realize, just common sense tells us that this can't continue. So therefore, you're looking for something new and different. And I have claimed that the other candidates in both parties actually are defenders of the status quo. And not a whole lot different. I think the only thing that distinguishes the two parties in many ways is the fact they want power. Who gets to control power for which? With this special interest versus this special interest. But think about it. Does the foreign policy ever change with the change of administration? No. And we've been doing this for years, if not all the way back to Woodrow Wilson. We've been involved in trying to make the world safe for democracy. Look at the mess we get in. And now we're broke. Our wars in the last 10 years have built $4 more trillion into debt. And we're still advancing in war countries. And we made this declaration that we're against the war on terrorism. We're at we have 900 to 1,000 bases. We're at 130 countries. The thing continues on and on. So we have to decide about cutting back. I think we should, cut back across the board with some priorities. I believe, really, if we continue to do this, our checks are going to bounce, and the people who are totally dependent on government, the people on Social Security or medical benefits, which in many ways are bankrupt now, and there would have been a better way to do it, but to work our way out of this, I would say, cut some of these departments out. I have 5 departments I would cut. I'd cut the spending overseas. I'd go back to 06 budgeting. But I would work real hard to protect the health care of children and for Social Security and try to work our way out of this. If not, we're going to have a major crisis, and that will not be good. Obviously, because the conditions are now that there's little respect for civil liberties by either party. Both parties are careless with civil liberties, and both parties haven't done. You know, Republicans haven't had a chance. I was, you know, there trying to get people to spend less money and balance budget. But, you know, when we were totally in charge, the deficit exploded too. Now they're even worse. So we have to ask as a people, what should the role of government be? And it's not complex. The founders asked the same question. They decided, and I agree with them. The role of government at the federal level should be the protection of liberty.
Yeah.
That should be. The other candidates, I believe, represent the past. There's nothing new or different. It's been what we've been putting through, and it's been slipping and sliding and sliding downhill for a long, long time. I believe the campaign that you're involved in is looking at the future. We can address the future, improve the future. We are not living in the past. We can pick up the pieces on this issue of freedom and build on it. We don't have to go to the past. It's those individuals who criticize us for going to the past. They want to go to tyranny. I mean, the government is getting too big. Our civil liberties are being undermined. Our houses are not secure. We're not well taken care of at our airports. The TSA doesn't exactly protect our civil liberties either. So something about that. But also, we're at a time now where the president has announced that he can assassinate American citizens. The National Defense Authorization Act says that. And it says that the president can use the military to arrest us. Arrest the citizens. You know, they say if you belong to an associated force, which associated unit, if you maybe websites, emails, meetings, donations, you might be associated with some bad people. And you could be arrested for that. No attorney. Held indefinitely in a secret prison. If we're going to see our republic returned, we won't have a Patriot Act, and we won't have the power of the federal government or the president to arrest American citizens by the military. Problems that I've talked about are not complex. It is the understanding of liberty. Freedom brings people together, and there's no reason that it is not an outreach. Is why I feel pleased that they did a poll and showed that the candidate that gets the strongest support from the middle class is myself. The candidate that runs the best against the Democrats is myself. And it's not me that does that. It's this issue of liberty because it comes together. If you understand liberty, diversity, all people should enjoy liberty. If we don't tell other people how to run their lives or what their religious values are, just so you don't hurt people, just so you don't steal from people or hurt their property, it should bring us all together. You have to tolerate how people spend their money and how people run their personal lives. But as long as they assume responsibility for themselves and don't come using force to get the benefits from their neighbor through the government, then it doesn't matter to anybody how they use their freedoms, and that is what we should have. But tomorrow we have another test of this philosophy. I feel good about Washington. I think we're going to have a great turnout. I think we're going to send a message. So let's send a loud and clear message tomorrow for the cause of liberty.
Secretary, but before I do, under your chair, some of you guys, I went ahead and put some signs. Don't feel bad you can't use those. They're there for you to use. Number 2, after this, 15 minutes after Dr. Paul is gone, just to do some business, we're going to have some training for tomorrow. So if you're a Washington resident, you can stay to get your training for what you have to do tomorrow if you haven't already. And if not, if you're an Oregonian, you're welcome to stick around because I'm going to tell you exactly what needs to be done first. So be dismissed before the training. Thank you very much. I'm going to take this to a questionnaire.
No, but that's all right.
Dr. Paul, when is it appropriate to use American military power?
I think is the question, when is it appropriate to use U.S. military power?
Yes.
You know, the Constitution is rather clear about the defense of the country. It's not a state issue, it's a federal issue. It's to provide for a national defense. And that's what it should be. The military power should be used to defend our country if under attack. Never to be used in preemptive war.
Dr. Paul, number 2, question number 2.
Thanks for coming to see us, Dr. Paul. I'm over here. Over the past 2 administrations, much attention has been paid to the use of executive orders and signing statements. What are your views on presidential use of these tools?
The signing statement, yes, a signing statement and executive orders. The signing statement is something that should be used. I would not use it. The signing statement is essentially the president pretending he has a line on the veto. He takes a bill and he signs the bill, but then he says at the bottom, I don't agree with A, B, and C, and I don't plan to follow it. So he sort of ducks it. It's a messy area. Whether or not that would hold up in court is another question, but it's a way for him to set the standards, and it's trying to usurp more power from the executive branch. I think that is wrong. Now, the executive order, our current president not too long ago was not happy with the Congress because the Congress was slow in passing some environmental laws that he wanted. He says, okay, I'll write an executive order and do the same thing. Now that is illegal. That is unconstitutional. It should not be tolerated. There are some executive orders that would be, legitimate under the Constitution. If there's a war going on and it's prescribed in the Constitution that's an explicit presidential power, he can write an order to carry this out. But to legislate is wrong. It would be my opinion that a president would be able to use the executive order to repeal executive orders that were not legitimate.
For pro-life voters, why should we vote for you as opposed to Santorum?
I think it's because he's a fake. In a serious way, that's a catchy word, I understand. But in a way, I don't think he's a conservative. And sometimes in the definition, I believe he thinks he's a conservative. But I would like to think conservative means less government. But he doesn't think it's less government spending overseas. There was never a foreign aid bill that he didn't vote for. And there wasn't a foreign adventure that he didn't support. He loves things like the drug war. So he's unconcerned about civil liberties. So he's for spending a lot of money and getting the government very involved in areas that I don't think is right. So if it's expanding the government, I don't know why we should call